Gabriella Romano stood in the doorway of the sunlit playroom, dust cloth in hand, watching the small figure seated by the window. 5-year-old Isabella Santoro sat perfectly still in her velvet chair, her unseeing eyes, clouded and unfocused according to every specialist her father had consulted, staring straight ahead at nothing. Or so everyone believed. Ella had been working as a maid in the Santoro mansion for 6 weeks now, moving through the palatial rooms like a ghost, cleaning and organizing while remaining invisible to the powerful family that lived there. It was exactly what she needed: anonymity, steady pay, and a place to hide from her own past. The Santoro estate in Westchester was more fortress than home. Security cameras monitored every corner. Guards patrolled the grounds in dark suits, their weapons barely concealed. Marco Santoro, the man who owned all of this, was one of New York's most powerful crime bosses, though the newspapers carefully called him a businessman with alleged organized crime ties. Ella had learned to be invisible long before coming here. After her father's investment firm collapsed in scandal 3 years ago, after the media destroyed her family's name, after her Columbia degree became worthless because everyone recognized the Romano name, she'd learned that sometimes survival meant disappearing. So Gabriella Romano became Ella, a simple maid with a manufactured work history and no connection to the socialite daughter of a disgraced financier. She kept her head down, her intelligence hidden, and her fluent Italian, the language her Sicilian grandmother had insisted she learn, locked away like all the other pieces of her former life. But watching Isabella now, Ella saw something that made her pause. The little girl's head turned, just slightly, barely perceptible, following the path of a butterfly that had fluttered past the window. Ella's breath caught. Blind children didn't track movement. They couldn't. She stood frozen, watching more carefully now. Isabella's fingers traced patterns on the armrest of her chair, but her clouded eyes, were they really unfocused? Or was there intelligence behind them, awareness being carefully concealed? Isabella. Ella said softly, her voice gentle. Would you like me to open the window? Let some fresh air in. The child's face remained blank, empty, the perfect mask of someone who couldn't see, couldn't perceive the world around her. But Ella noticed the tiny tension in her shoulders, the way her breathing changed just slightly. This child was hiding. And she was doing it brilliantly. Before Ella could investigate further, footsteps echoed down the marble hallway. Heavy, purposeful, authoritative. She immediately stepped back, returning to her dusting, becoming invisible once more. Marco Santoro entered the playroom, and even after 6 weeks of working in his home, Ella's breath still caught at the sight of him. He was in his mid-30s, tall and powerfully built, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without effort. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Roman statues, strong jaw, intense dark eyes that seemed to calculate everything they saw, the kind of masculine beauty that was almost dangerous to look at directly. Today he wore charcoal slacks and a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with old scars. He'd been in meetings all morning, she'd heard the raised voices in Italian from his study, the kind of business discussions that made the household staff nervous. But now, entering his daughter's room, his entire demeanor shifted. The hardness melted from his face, replaced by such profound tenderness and grief that Ella felt her chest tighten. Principessa, he said softly, kneeling beside Isabella's chair. How is my beautiful girl today? Isabella didn't respond. Didn't turn her head. Didn't acknowledge his presence. She simply sat, staring at nothing with those clouded, unseeing eyes. Ella watched Marco's face crumble for just a moment before he locked it down. She'd seen this same scene play out dozens of times over the past 6 weeks. He would come to Isabella's room, speak to her gently in Italian and English, try to coax some response. And the child would give him nothing. No words. No recognition. Just silence and stillness. The doctor said it was the trauma. Isabella had been in the car when her mother died 2 years ago, a terrible accident on a rain-slicked road, the vehicle hydroplaning and crashing into a barrier. Maria Santoro had died instantly. Isabella had survived physically unharmed but had emerged from the wreckage silent and sightless. Cortical blindness, the specialists called it. Trauma-induced vision loss despite healthy eyes. Rare but not unheard of in children who'd witnessed something too terrible to process. Combined with selective mutism, she hadn't spoken a single word since the accident. Marco had spent millions seeking treatment. The best pediatric neurologists, trauma therapists, vision specialists. Nothing worked. Isabella remained locked in her silent, sightless world, and her father was slowly breaking trying to reach her. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from, I love hearing from you. I brought you something, tesoro, Marco said now, pulling a small stuffed animal from his pocket, a soft white rabbit with pink ears. Your Nana sent it from Italy. She says to tell you she loves you very much and thinks about you every day. He placed the rabbit in Isabella's lap. The child's hands remained motionless at her sides. She didn't reach for it, didn't acknowledge it existed. Ella watched Marco's shoulders tense, saw him fighting back emotion. Then his eyes lifted and found her standing near the bookshelf, and his expression immediately hardened back into the mask of the man everyone feared. You, he said, his voice sharp. What are you doing in here? Dusting, Mr. Santoro, Ella said quietly, keeping her eyes down in the submissive posture expected of household staff. Mrs. Chen assigned me to clean the playroom this morning. I can come back later if... No. It's fine. Just... He stood, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Just be quiet. And don't disturb her. Of course, sir. Marco kissed Isabella's forehead gently, murmured something in Italian that Ella caught, Ti amo, principessa mia. Semper. And then left the room with the same heavy footsteps that had announced his arrival. Ella waited until the sound faded completely. Then she set down her dust cloth and moved closer to Isabella, kneeling to be at eye level with the child. He loves you very much, Ella said softly. Your papa. He would do anything for you. No response. Isabella's face remained blank, her clouded eyes staring at nothing. But Ella noticed something. The stuffed rabbit that Marco had placed in Isabella's lap had shifted slightly. Not fallen, shifted. As if small fingers had adjusted it, positioned it more securely, even though those same fingers now lay motionless at the child's sides. Ella's heart began to race. She'd worked with children before, had volunteered at pediatric hospitals during her college years. She knew what selective mutism looked like, what trauma responses looked like. This was something else. Isabella, Ella said, switching to Italian without thinking, her grandmother's native tongue flowing naturally. Posso sedermi con te? May I sit with you? Still no response. But, was that the tiniest tension in the child's jaw? The slightest change in her breathing? Ella stood and moved to the window, deliberately positioning herself where Isabella's, unseeing, eyes were pointed. She made a show of adjusting the curtains, her movements slow and obvious. And there, barely perceptible, but there, Isabella's pupils contracted slightly as Ella's hand moved across her field of vision. Pupils don't contract in response to movement in someone who's truly cortically blind. They might react to light, but not to visual tracking. Unless the person wasn't blind at all. Oh, piccola, Ella whispered, her heart breaking. What are you hiding from? She spent the next hour in that playroom, dusting and organizing while covertly observing Isabella. And slowly, carefully, she began to see the truth. When Ella dropped a book, Isabella's shoulders tensed a split second before the sound, she'd seen it falling. When a bird landed on the windowsill, Isabella's head turned fractionally to track it before catching herself and freezing. When Ella moved a toy from one side of the room to the other, Isabella's fingers twitched toward where it had been, then corrected toward where it now was, knowledge she couldn't have unless she could see. This child wasn't blind. She was hiding. And she was doing it so well that she'd fooled neurologists, therapists, and her own father for 2 years. The question was, why? Over the next 2 weeks, Ella became obsessed with understanding Isabella's secret. She volunteered for every assignment that brought her near the child's rooms, watching and documenting the tiny tells that revealed the truth. Isabella could see. There was no doubt in Ella's mind anymore. But the child was also terrified. Whatever she'd witnessed in that car crash, whatever trauma had locked her in this self-imposed prison, it was so overwhelming that she'd chosen blindness and silence over engaging with the world. Ella tried gentle approaches, speaking softly to Isabella in Italian, reading stories aloud, sitting quietly nearby to establish trust. The child never responded, never broke her careful facade. But Ella noticed the small things, how Isabella would turn pages of a Braille book slightly faster when Ella read stories with happy endings, how she'd lean imperceptibly toward Ella's voice, how her breathing would calm when Ella sang old Italian lullabies their grandmothers might have shared. Connection was forming, fragile as spun glass. Then came the day everything changed. Ella was cleaning Marco's study, a room she normally avoided because it felt like trespassing in the lion's den. But Mrs. Chen had assigned her the task, and Ella didn't question orders. The study was masculine and imposing, dark wood, leather furniture, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with volumes in Italian and English. A massive mahogany desk dominated the space, its surface covered with papers, a laptop, and framed photos. Ella's eyes were drawn to one photo in particular, a beautiful woman with warm brown eyes and a radiant smile, holding a toddler version of Isabella. Maria Santoro, the wife Marco had lost. The mother Isabella had watched die. "You're not supposed to be in here." Ella spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Marco stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable but his body language radiating controlled danger. "Mrs. Chen assigned me to clean your study, Mr. Santoro," Ella said quickly, keeping her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "I apologize if I overstepped. I can come back another time." "What were you looking at?" His eyes went to the photo on his desk. "Nothing, sir. I was just dusting." "You were looking at my wife." Marco moved into the room, closing the door behind him. The click of the latch sounded ominous. Why? Ella's mind raced. She should apologize, make herself smaller, disappear back into invisibility. Instead, she found herself saying, she was beautiful. You can see the love in her eyes when she looks at Isabella. Marco's expression flickered, surprise, pain, something deeper. "You speak as if you knew her." "I didn't. But I know grief. I know what it looks like when someone loses the person they built their world around." Ella met his eyes, forgetting for a moment that she was supposed to be invisible. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Santoro. Truly." He studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. This close, she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, the fine lines around them that spoke of sleepless nights, the way his jaw tensed like he was fighting back emotion. "You're different from the other staff," he said quietly. "The way you speak. The way you carry yourself. Who are you really, Ella?" Her stomach dropped. Had he investigated her? Discovered her real identity? "I'm just a maid, sir." "No." He moved closer, and Ella's back hit the bookshelf. He wasn't threatening, exactly, but his presence was overwhelming. "You're educated. I can hear it in your vocabulary, your syntax. You observe things others miss. You treat Isabella with a gentleness that goes beyond duty." His eyes narrowed. "Why are you working as a maid when you're clearly capable of more?" Ella's heart hammered. She should deflect, should lie. Instead, trapped by those intense eyes and the genuine curiosity beneath his suspicion, she found herself telling a version of the truth. "Because sometimes people need to disappear," she said quietly. "Sometimes the world decides who you are based on your name or your past, and the only way to survive is to become someone else. Someone invisible." Marco's expression shifted, something like understanding flickering across his face. "You're hiding. We all are, Mr. Santoro. You hide behind your reputation and your power. Your daughter hides behind." She stopped abruptly, realizing what she'd almost said. "Behind what?" Marco's voice was sharp now, commanding. "Finish that sentence." Ella's mind spun. This was it, the moment she'd been avoiding, the secret she'd been keeping. But looking at Marco's face, seeing the desperate hope mixed with fear in his eyes, she made a choice. "Not here," she said softly. "Not like this. But Mr. Santoro, I need to tell you something about Isabella. Something important. Something that might change everything." His hand shot out, gripping her arm, not painfully, but with desperate intensity. "What about my daughter? What do you know?" "Meet me in the garden pavilion tonight at 10, Ella said urgently. "After the household staff has retired. I'll explain everything. But it has to be private. It has to be." The study door opened. Mrs. Chen appeared, her expression disapproving. "Ella, you're needed in the kitchen. And Mr. Santoro, your 4 o'clock appointment has arrived." Marco released Ella's arm, stepping back into his mask of control. But his eyes held hers, burning with questions and commands. "Tonight. 10 o'clock. Don't make me wait." It wasn't a request. The hours until 10 o'clock stretched like torture. Ella went through her duties mechanically, her mind spinning with what she was about to do. Revealing Isabella's secret would change everything, for the child, for Marco, for Ella's own carefully maintained invisibility. But she couldn't stay silent. Not when a little girl was trapped in a prison of her own making, and her father was breaking trying to reach her. At 9:45, Ella slipped out of the servants' quarters and made her way through the darkened mansion to the garden pavilion. It was a beautiful structure at the edge of the estate's rose garden, private and secluded. Marco was already there, standing with his back to her, staring out at the moonlit gardens. He'd changed from his business clothes into dark jeans and a fitted black t-shirt that revealed the powerful build beneath. Without his usual armor of expensive suits, he looked younger, more human. "You came," he said without turning around. "You didn't give me much choice." Ella moved into the pavilion, keeping a safe distance between them. "What I'm about to tell you will be difficult to hear. But I need you to listen with an open mind and an open heart." Marco turned to face her, and the moonlight caught his features, revealing raw vulnerability beneath his usual control. "Tell me. Whatever it is, I can handle it." Ella took a deep breath. "Your daughter can see." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. Marco's face went through a series of rapid changes: confusion, disbelief, anger, hope. "What did you say?" "Isabella can see," Ella repeated, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "She's not blind, Mr. Santoro. She never was." The cortical blindness diagnosis was wrong, or rather, it became wrong at some point and no one noticed because she's been hiding it. "That's impossible." Marco's voice was hard, defensive. "I've taken her to the best specialists in the world. Neurologists, ophthalmologists, trauma experts. They all confirmed. What Isabella wanted them to see," Ella interrupted gently. "Because she's a brilliant, traumatized little girl who learned that if she stayed blind and silent, she could stay safe. Safe from whatever terrified her so much that day in the car." "You're wrong." But Marco's voice cracked on the words. "You're wrong because if you're right, that means she's been locked in this nightmare by choice. That means I could have reached her, could have helped her, and instead I've just been failing her for 2 years." "You haven't failed her." Ella stepped closer, her hand reaching out instinctively before she caught herself. "You loved her. You protected her. You gave her space to heal in the only way she knew how. But Mr. Santoro, Marco, she's ready now. I've been watching her for weeks. She's starting to reach out in tiny ways. She wants to come back. She just needs someone to show her it's safe." Marco stared at her, his chest heaving with emotion. "How do you know? What did you see?" Ella explained everything: the tracked movement, the pupil responses, the tiny adjustments that revealed vision. She pulled out her phone, showing him the notes she'd been keeping, the observations that built an undeniable case. With each piece of evidence, Marco's face transformed. The grief, the hope, the anger at himself for not seeing what she'd seen. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he demanded. "If you knew weeks ago." "Because I needed to be sure. Because making this claim without absolute certainty would have been cruel. And because..." Ella hesitated. "Because I needed to understand why she was hiding before I revealed her secret." "And do you understand why?" "I think so." Ella's voice softened. She was 3 years old when she watched her mother die. 3 years old in a car crash, seeing something no child should ever see. And in that moment of absolute terror, something inside her broke. She closed her eyes to the horror, and when she opened them again, she told herself she couldn't see. Because if she couldn't see, then what she'd witnessed wasn't real. If she stayed blind and silent, she could stay frozen in that moment before everything changed. Tears streaked down Marco's face now, unchecked. "How do I reach her? How do I bring her back?" "Carefully. Gently. With patience and love." Ella moved closer, and this time she did touch him, her hand on his arm. "But first, you have to believe me. You have to trust what I'm telling you, even though I'm just a maid, even though I have no credentials or authority. You have to." "Who are you?" Marco's hand covered hers, his touch warm and firm. "Really? Because no, just a maid, speaks like you do, observes like you do, understands trauma psychology like you do." Ella's carefully constructed walls cracked. Maybe it was the moonlight, or the emotion of the moment, or the way he looked at her like she was the answer to prayers he'd been too afraid to voice. But she found herself telling him the truth. "My name is Gabriella Romano. My father was Vincent Romano, yes, that Vincent Romano, the one who defrauded investors of hundreds of millions of dollars. I had a degree from Columbia in child psychology. I was going to be a therapist, work with traumatized children. Then my father's crimes destroyed everything. The media crucified our family. My degree became worthless because no one would hire Romano's daughter. So I became Ella, invisible maid, because it was the only way to survive." Marco's hand tightened on hers. "You gave up everything." "I lost everything. There's a difference. Ella met his eyes. But losing everything also freed me to do what matters. To help people without credentials or recognition getting in the way. To see your daughter not as a case study but as a child in pain. To tell you the truth because I have nothing left to lose. You have everything to lose. Marco's other hand came up to cup her face, the gesture achingly gentle from such a dangerous man. I could destroy what's left of your life for lying to me about your identity. I could. But you won't. Ella leaned into his touch without thinking. Because you're not the monster everyone says you are. You're a father who loves his daughter. A man who's been drowning in grief and searching desperately for a lifeline. And I'm offering you one. The air between them crackled with electricity, with possibility, with the dangerous attraction of two people who'd both built walls around themselves finding cracks in each other's armor. Help me reach her, Marco whispered, his forehead nearly touching Ella's. Help me bring my daughter back. Please. I will. The promise was absolute. But we do this together. As partners. You have to trust me, trust my observations, trust my instincts about what she needs. I trust you. The words were weighted with meaning beyond the immediate situation. I don't know why, but I trust you, Gabriella Romano. Her real name on his lips sent shivers through her. Then tomorrow, we begin. Carefully, gently. We show Isabella that it's safe to see again. That the world isn't as terrifying as she remembers. That her papa will keep her safe no matter what. Marco nodded, his hands still cradling her face. For a long moment, they stood like that, breathing the same air, connected by secrets and hope and something neither of them wanted to name. Then Marco stepped back, breaking the spell. Tomorrow. But Gabriella. Ella, she corrected softly. At least until we're sure who can be trusted with my real identity. Ella, he agreed. Thank you. For seeing what no one else saw. For caring about a child who isn't yours. For being brave enough to tell me a truth that could have gotten you fired or worse. She deserves to be free, Ella said simply. And so do you. As Ella walked back to her quarters through the moonlit gardens, her heart raced with anticipation and fear. Tomorrow they would try to reach Isabella, to coax her out of her self-imposed prison. But what Ella didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that someone had been watching them in the pavilion. Someone who now knew that the maid wasn't who she claimed to be, and that Marco Santoro's carefully guarded daughter had a secret. And in their world, secrets were currency. Dangerous, valuable currency that could be used to destroy everything. The collision of truth and deception had begun. And before it ended, everyone's carefully constructed walls would come crashing down. Ella barely slept that night. She lay in her small room in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling, running through strategies for reaching Isabella. Everything had to be perfect. One wrong move could send the child deeper into her protective shell, undoing any chance of breakthrough. At 6 a.m, she rose and prepared for the day with extra care. Today she wasn't just a maid. Today she was embarking on the most important work she'd done since losing her career, helping a traumatized child find her way back to the world. She found Marco already awake, standing outside Isabella's bedroom door with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her without a word, his eyes shadowed from lack of sleep but burning with determination. I've been standing here for an hour, he admitted quietly. Trying to figure out how to see my own daughter differently. How to look for the signs you saw. It takes practice, Ella said gently. And it helps that she doesn't know I know. She's still performing for me, which means she makes tiny mistakes. With you, she's more careful because the stakes are higher. How do we start? We don't start with confrontation or big revelations. We start with trust. Ella set down her coffee cup. Today, you're going to spend time with Isabella like you normally would. But I'll be there too, in the background. You'll see what I see. Then tonight, we'll discuss the next step. Marco nodded, his jaw tight with barely controlled emotion. And if you're wrong? If I start hoping and believing and she's really? I'm not wrong. Ella met his eyes with absolute certainty. Trust me, Marco. Just for today. Trust me. The morning session in Isabella's playroom was excruciating and enlightening in equal measure. Marco sat with his daughter, reading her a story in Italian, a fairy tale about a princess who found her voice. His deep voice was tender, patient, filled with love. Isabella sat in her usual position by the window, her clouded eyes staring at nothing, her small body perfectly still. Ella worked quietly in the corner, dusting bookshelves, organizing toys, seemingly paying no attention to father and daughter. But she'd positioned a small mirror on one of the shelves, angled so Marco could see Isabella's reflection if he looked up from his book. She'd coached him before they entered, don't stare at her directly. She'll feel it and lock down harder. But watch the mirror. Watch for the small things. 20 minutes into the story, it happened. Marco turned a page of the illustrated book, revealing a colorful image of a dragon. In the mirror's reflection, Isabella's pupils dilated slightly, her head tilting a fraction of an inch to see the picture better. Marco's voice stuttered on a word. Ella saw his hand tighten on the book, saw the moment realization crash through him like a wave. But to his credit, he recovered quickly, continuing the story without missing more than a beat. Ella met his eyes in the mirror. She gave him the smallest nod of confirmation. Your daughter can see. When the story ended, Marco gently kissed Isabella's forehead and left the room, his movements controlled but his eyes blazing with suppressed emotion. Ella followed a few minutes later, finding him in the hallway, his back against the wall, his hands shaking. Dio mio, he breathed. You were right. She looked at the picture. She saw it. Yes. Ella touched his arm gently. And now you understand what we're working with. She's not broken, Marco. She's hiding. There's a difference. How long? His voice cracked. How long has she been able to see while I thought she was blind? I don't know. It could be recent, her vision returning and her choosing to hide it. Or it could be longer. But what matters is now. What matters is bringing her back gently, safely, in a way that doesn't traumatize her further. Marco ran his hands through his hair, the carefully styled perfection from this morning now disheveled. Tell me what to do. Whatever it takes. I'll do anything. First, we establish more trust. Between you and Isabella, yes, but also between us. Ella took a breath. You need to tell your household staff that I'm being reassigned. That I'm now working exclusively with Isabella as her companion or caretaker. It will give me more time with her without raising suspicions. Done. What else? We create opportunities for Isabella to slip up, to show her vision in ways that feel safe to her. We make the world interesting enough that she wants to engage with it. We. Mr. Santoro. A sharp voice interrupted them. Mrs. Chen stood at the end of the hallway, her expression disapproving. Your 11 o'clock appointment is here. And Ella, you have duties in the... Ella's duties have changed, Marco said, his voice carrying absolute authority. As of today, she works exclusively with Isabella. Companion, caretaker, whatever title makes sense. Clear her of all other household tasks. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose. Sir, is that wise? She's only been with us for... It's not a request, Mrs. Chen. It's an order. Marco's tone brooked no argument. Ella will have full access to Isabella's schedule, her rooms, and any resources she needs. Is that understood? Yes, sir. Mrs. Chen's gaze shifted to Ella with thinly veiled suspicion. Of course. As the housekeeper walked away, Ella felt the weight of new attention settling on her shoulders. She'd wanted to stay invisible. Now Marco had just painted a target on her back. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Now everyone will be watching me. Good. Marco's hand found hers, squeezing briefly. Let them watch you help my daughter. Let them see that I trust you completely. His voice dropped. Because I do, Gabriella. More than I've trusted anyone in years. The use of her real name, spoken softly in the empty hallway, felt like an intimacy she wasn't prepared for. Over the next week, Ella established a careful routine with Isabella. She would arrive each morning with breakfast, speaking softly in Italian and English, telling stories about her day, about the weather, about anything that might spark interest. She'd bring interesting objects, textured fabrics, flowers from the garden, music boxes that played gentle melodies. And slowly, incrementally, Isabella began to respond. Not overtly. Never breaking her careful facade when she knew she was being watched. But in the small moments when she thought Ella was distracted, the mask would slip. Ella watched Isabella track a butterfly through the window, her unseeing eyes following its erratic flight pattern with perfect precision. She saw the child's fingers reach for a red flower instead of a white one when Ella held both equidistant, choosing based on sight, not touch. She caught Isabella turning her head towards sudden movements before the accompanying sounds could give them away. The evidence mounted daily. And each evening, Ella would meet with Marco in his study, sharing observations, planning the next steps, watching his grief transform into desperate hope. But they also talked about other things. Marco told her about his childhood in Sicily, about his father's legitimate olive oil business and how he'd been pulled into a different world when his father was killed by a rival family. About choosing power and protection over innocence because it was the only way to keep his remaining family safe. Ella told him about her Columbia education, her dreams of helping traumatized children, the way her father's crimes had stolen not just money but futures from everyone connected to his name. They discovered they both loved opera, both read voraciously, both carried the weight of family legacy like chains they couldn't break. "You understand," Marco said one night, his voice rough with emotion. "What it's like to be defined by a name you didn't choose. To have your own identity buried under expectations and judgments." "Yes," Ella agreed softly. They were sitting across from each other in his study, the late hour and shared vulnerability creating dangerous intimacy. "But I also understand that we're not our fathers. We're not our pasts. We get to choose who we become." "Do we?" Marco's eyes held hers. "Because I've done things, Gabriella. Terrible things to protect my family, to maintain power. I'm not a good man. You're a complicated man." Ella leaned forward. "Good and bad aren't binaries. You've hurt people, yes. But you also love your daughter with a ferocity that takes my breath away. You've given me a chance when you could have destroyed me for lying about my identity. You're trying to build something better than what you inherited. Because of you." Marco stood, moving around the desk to stand before her. "Before you came, I was just existing. Going through the motions. Drowning in grief and guilt. But you walked into my home and saw things no one else saw. You gave me hope when I thought I'd lost everything that mattered." Ella stood too, and suddenly they were close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Marco. I'm falling for you," he said, the confession stark and honest. "I know it's too soon. I know it's complicated. I know you're here for Isabella, not for me. But I need you to know that when I look at you, I see someone extraordinary. Someone brave and brilliant and beautiful. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am." Ella's heart hammered against her ribs. Every rational thought screamed at her to step back, maintain professional boundaries, remember why she was really here. But when she looked into Marco's eyes and saw the vulnerability there, this powerful, dangerous man laying himself bare, rationality crumbled. "I'm falling for you too," she whispered. "And it terrifies me." Marco's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Why?" "Because people I love get hurt. My mother worked herself to death trying to salvage my father's mess. My brother had to abandon his dreams. Everyone connected to me pays a price." Her voice shook. "And you're already carrying so much pain. I don't want to add to it." "You couldn't." Marco's forehead touched hers. "You're the first thing that's eased the pain in 2 years. The first person who's made me feel like maybe I deserve something good." "You do," Ella breathed. "You deserve so much more than." The study door burst open. Antonio, Marco's head of security, rushed in, his expression urgent. "Boss, we have a problem. Someone's been asking questions. About Ella. About her real identity." Ella's blood ran cold. Marco immediately shifted, his body moving between her and Antonio, protective instinct automatic. "Who?" Marco's voice was lethal calm. "Carlo Russo. He runs information for the Moretti family." Antonio's eyes flicked to Ella apologetically. "He's been digging into the household staff. Found inconsistencies in Ella's work history. He knows she's not who she claims to be." "How much does he know?" Marco demanded. "Everything. Her real name, her father's crimes, her Columbia degree. He's been building a file." Antonio pulled out his phone, showing them photos, surveillance shots of Ella leaving the mansion, documents with her real information, even old society page photos from before her family's fall. "Why?" Ella asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Why would someone investigate household staff?" Marco and Antonio exchanged a look that made Ella's stomach drop. "Because someone paid him to," Marco said grimly. "Someone who wants leverage over me. Someone who's been watching us carefully enough to notice that you've become important. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload." Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Who would? Ella started, but the answer hit her before she finished the question. Your enemies. Someone who wants to use me to get to you. Or to Isabella. Exactly. Marco's jaw clenched. Which means we need to move quickly. Antonio, I want full security on Gabriella. 24/7 protection. She doesn't leave this estate without armed guards. Marco, that's excessive. It's necessary. He turned to her, his hands gripping her shoulders. You're in danger now because of me. Because I brought you into my world, gave you importance, made it obvious that you matter. Anyone watching knows that hurting you would hurt me. Then I should leave. Even as Ella said it, her heart rebelled against the idea. I should disappear again, keep you and Isabella safe. No. The word was absolute. You're not leaving. You're not running. You're under my protection now, Gabriella. That's not negotiable. You can't just. I can, and I am. Marco's voice softened, but the steel underneath remained. I won't lose you. Not when I just found you. Not when Isabella needs you. Not when, he stopped, his jaw working. Not when I'm falling in love with you. The study went silent. Antonio suddenly became very interested in his phone. Ella stared at Marco, her heart doing impossible things in her chest. You can't love me, she whispered. We barely know each other. I know you risked everything to help a child who wasn't yours. I know you speak 3 languages and light up when you talk about child psychology. I know you sing old Italian songs when you think no one's listening. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar and you're left-handed and you have a small scar on your right knee from falling off a bike when you were 7. His hands framed her face. I know that when you smile at me, really smile, it feels like the sun breaking through clouds. And I know that the thought of someone hurting you makes me capable of violence that would horrify you. Marco. You don't have to say it back. You don't have to feel the same way. But you need to know where I stand. You need to understand that I will protect you with everything I have. Because you're mine now, Gabriella. Mine to protect. Mine to care for. Mine to. He stopped, emotion choking his words. Ella reached up, covering his hands with hers. I feel it too. This impossible, terrifying thing between us. But Marco, I'm scared. Scared of putting Isabella at risk. Scared of being the weakness that destroys you. Scared of. Then be scared with me, Marco interrupted. But don't run. Stay. Help me reach my daughter. Let me keep you safe. Let us figure out what this is together. Before Ella could respond, Antonio cleared his throat. Boss, there's more. Russo's been taking meetings with Viktor Volkov. Marco's entire body went rigid. The Russian. Yes. He's trying to expand into your territory. Word is he's looking for leverage. Ways to force you into concessions. And he thinks Gabriella is that leverage. Marco's voice was deadly quiet. He thinks he can use her to control me. Probably. Which is why we need to move her. The penthouse in Manhattan is more secure. We can. No. Ella stepped back from Marco, clarity cutting through the emotion. Moving me makes Isabella suspicious. She's just starting to trust me. If I suddenly disappear or if armed guards start following me around her, she'll lock down harder. We'll lose all the progress we've made. Your safety is more important than progress, Marco argued. Not to Isabella. Ella's voice was firm. That child has lost her mother, lost her sight, or thinks she has, lost her voice. If she loses me too, someone she's starting to trust, it could destroy what little healing she's managed. I won't do that to her. Marco stared at her, conflict raging in his expression. You're asking me to choose between protecting you and protecting my daughter's mental health. I'm asking you to trust that we can do both. Ella moved closer again. Increase security around the estate. Have your men watch for threats. But let me continue working with Isabella like normal. Don't let your fear for me stop her healing. She's right, boss, Antonio said quietly. If this is about leverage, they won't move until they think they have the perfect opportunity. We have time to secure the perimeter, increase surveillance. And if Miss Romano is inside the estate with Isabella, she's actually safer than anywhere else. Marco closed his eyes, his hands clenching into fists. I hate this. I hate that you're in danger because of me. I hate that my world touches everything good and makes it dangerous. Then let's change your world, Ella said softly. Little by little. Starting with bringing your daughter back from the darkness. Showing her that even in dangerous places, love can bloom. That even broken families can heal. Marco pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough that she could barely breathe. If anything happens to you. It won't. Ella wrapped her arms around him, feeling his heart hammer against her chest. We're going to be okay. All of us. I believe that. She just hoped she was right. The next 3 days were tense. Antonio's security measures turned the estate into a fortress. New guards patrolled the grounds. Cameras were upgraded. Background checks were run on every staff member. But inside Isabella's playroom, a different kind of breakthrough was happening. Ella had brought a box of watercolors and paper, setting them up on a small table. I'm going to paint something, Isabella, she said in Italian. You don't have to participate. Just keep me company, si. She began painting a simple landscape, the gardens outside, the roses in bloom, the fountain at the center. She described what she was doing as she worked, her voice soft and rhythmic. The roses are red today. So red they almost look like they're on fire in the sunlight. And the fountain, do you remember the fountain, Piccola? The way the water dances and sparkles? Isabella sat motionless in her chair, her clouded eyes pointed toward the window as always. But Ella noticed her fingers twitching slightly, as if itching to touch the paints, to create something herself. Your mommy used to paint, didn't she? Ella continued softly. I saw some of her work in your papa's study. Beautiful watercolors of Sicily. She had real talent. A tiny change in Isabella's breathing. The first real reaction to mention of her mother. I bet she taught you colors, Ella went on, painting gentle strokes. I bet she showed you how red and yellow make orange. How blue and yellow make green. Did she do that, tesoro? Silence. But Isabella's hands had moved to grip the arms of her chair, tension visible in her small frame. It's okay to miss her, Ella whispered. It's okay to remember. Remembering the people we love doesn't hurt them. It honors them. It keeps them alive in our hearts. A single tear rolled down Isabella's cheek. Ella's breath caught. In 8 weeks, she'd never seen the child cry. Never seen her express any emotion beyond careful blankness. Oh, Bambina, Ella murmured, moving to kneel beside Isabella's chair. It's okay. Let it out. You're safe here. I promise you're safe. Another tear. Then another. Silent, controlled, but real. Ella wanted desperately to pull the child into her arms, but she held back. Too much, too fast could shatter this fragile moment. Instead, she just stayed close, speaking softly in Italian. Your papa loves you so much. He talks about you every day. He reads you stories and brings you gifts and sits with you even when you don't respond. He would do anything, give up everything, just to hear your voice again. Just to see you smile. Isabella's small hand moved. Slowly, hesitantly, it reached out, and touched the watercolor painting. Her finger traced the red roses Ella had painted, leaving a smudge of color on the paper. Then, so softly Ella almost missed it, a whisper, Mama loved roses. Ella's heart stopped. The first words Isabella had spoken in 2 years. Yes, Ella breathed, tears streaming down her own face now. Yes, she did. Red ones, just like these. Isabella's clouded eyes, not as unfocused as they pretended to be, turned toward Ella. You paint like Mama. Thank you, Piccola. That's a beautiful compliment. A long pause. Then, I saw the butterfly. Last week. I saw it. The confession hung in the air like a fragile soap bubble, beautiful and terrifying. I know, Ella said gently. I know you can see, Isabella. And that's okay. That's wonderful. You don't have to hide anymore. Papa will be sad. Isabella's voice cracked. He thinks I'm blind. He'll be sad that I lied. No, Bambina. He'll be happy. So happy that you're healing. That you're coming back. Ella carefully, slowly, took Isabella's small hand in hers. Do you want to tell him? We can tell him together. Or we can wait until you're ready. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm scared. Of what, tesoro? If I talk. I'll remember. I'll remember Mama and the crash and, her voice broke into a sob. I don't want to remember. Oh, sweetheart. Ella couldn't hold back anymore. She pulled Isabella into her arms, and the child collapsed against her, crying for the first time in 2 years. I know. I know it's scary. But hiding from memories doesn't make them go away. It just makes you small and silent and alone. And you're not alone, Isabella. Your papa is here. I'm here. We'll help you carry the scary memories until they're not so heavy anymore. Isabella cried into Ella's shoulder, her small body shaking with grief and relief in equal measure. And Ella held her, rocking gently, murmuring comfort in Italian and English, her own tears falling into the child's dark hair. They stayed like that for a long time. When Isabella finally quieted, she pulled back slightly, her eyes, truly focused now, the pretense abandoned, meeting Ella's. Will you help me tell Papa? Of course. Whenever you're ready. Now, Isabella whispered. I want to tell him now. Before I get too scared again. Ella's heart raced. Are you sure? Isabella nodded, her small jaw set with determination that reminded Ella so much of Marco. I'm sure. Marco was in his study when Ella called him. Can you come to the playroom? Isabella wants to see you. She heard his sharp intake of breath. I'll be right there. He arrived within 60 seconds, his face tense with worry. But when he entered the playroom and saw Isabella standing, not sitting in her usual chair, his step faltered. Principessa. His voice was barely a whisper. Isabella stood with her back to him, her small shoulders squared. Ella stood beside her, holding her hand for support. Papa, Isabella said, her voice small but clear. I need to tell you something. Marco froze in the doorway, his expression cycling through shock, hope, and fear. Tesoro. You're speaking. Yes. Isabella turned slowly to face him. And for the first time in 2 years, she looked directly at her father, her eyes focused and clear. And I can see you, Papa. I can see you crying. Marco's knees buckled. He dropped to the floor, a sob tearing from his chest. Isabella. Dio mio, Isabella. The little girl ran to him, with perfect coordination, seeing exactly where she was going, and threw herself into her father's arms. I'm sorry, Papa, she cried. I'm sorry I hid. I'm sorry I made you sad. I was so scared after Mama died. I didn't know how to. Shoo, Principessa. Shoo. Marco held his daughter like she might disappear, his tears falling freely. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. You did what you needed to do to survive. And now you're here. You're back. You're talking and seeing and, his voice broke completely. Ella watched from a few feet away, her own tears streaming down her face. This moment, this impossible, beautiful moment, was why she'd become a psychologist. Why she'd endured her father's scandal and her family's fall and all the pain that came with it. To see healing happen. To witness love breaking through trauma. Marco looked up at her over Isabella's head, his eyes full of gratitude so profound it made her chest ache. Thank you, he mouthed silently. Thank you. Father and daughter held each other for a long time, crying and laughing and speaking in rapid Italian, years of silence pouring out in a flood of words. Isabella told him about the accident, about being too scared to see or speak, about slowly realizing she could see but being too afraid to admit it. Marco listened to every word, his hand stroking her hair, his voice murmuring comfort and love and promises that she would never have to be that scared again. Finally, Isabella pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes. Papa, Ella helped me. She saw me when I was hiding. She made me brave enough to come back. I know, tesoro. She's extraordinary. Marco's eyes found Ella's again. She's the angel who saved our whole family. Are you going to marry her? Isabella asked with the blunt honesty of children. Marco choked on surprised laughter. What? You look at her the way you used to look at Mama. Like she's the most important person in the world. Isabella turned to study Ella with clear, focused eyes. And she looks at you the same way. So are you going to marry her? Ella felt her face flush. Isabella, that's not, your father and I are just in love, Isabella finished matter-of-factly. Even I can see that, and I was pretending to be blind. Marco stood, lifting Isabella into his arms, and crossed to Ella. My daughter is very observant. Apparently more observant than I gave her credit for. Marco, Ella started. She's also right. Marco's free hand reached out to cup Ella's face. I am in love with you, Gabriella Romano. Completely. Impossibly. Permanently. This is happening too fast, Ella protested weakly. We barely know each other. You're just emotional because of Isabella. I'm emotional because for the first time in 2 years, I have hope. Marco's thumb brushed her cheekbone. Hope that my daughter can heal. Hope that I can build something better than what I inherited. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I deserve something good in my life. His voice dropped. And you're the best thing I've ever found, amore mio. You're brilliant and brave and you see people, really see them, the way you saw Isabella. The way you see me. I see a complicated man, Ella whispered. A dangerous man. But you see the man underneath all that. The father who loves his daughter. The person trying to be better than his past. And when you look at me like that, like right now, I almost believe I can be who you see. Isabella, still in Marco's arms, looked between them. So you are going to marry her? If she'll have me, Marco said, his eyes never leaving Ella's face. Though I should probably ask properly. With a ring and flowers and... Yes, Ella interrupted, laughing through her tears. You ridiculous, impossible man. Yes. Marco kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, while Isabella giggled and said, you, grown-up kissing is gross. But when they broke apart, the little girl wrapped her arms around both of them, pulling them into a three-way embrace. We're a family now, she declared. Right? Right, Marco agreed, his voice thick with emotion. Right, Ella echoed, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. They stood like that for a long moment, the broken family made whole, the lost child found, the woman who'd given up everything discovering she'd gained the world. Outside the playroom, Antonio stood guard, a rare smile on his usually stern face. But further out, beyond the estate walls, darker forces were moving. Carlo Russo had delivered his file on Gabriella Romano to Viktor Volkov. And the Russian mob boss was planning his move carefully, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The family had found healing and hope. But the danger wasn't over. It was just beginning. The breakthrough with Isabella changed everything. Over the next week, the mansion that had been shrouded in grief and silence transformed into a place of cautious joy. Isabella spoke more each day, her vocabulary expanding as 2 years of silence poured out. She drew pictures, played in the garden, and most importantly, she smiled, genuine, beautiful smiles that lit up her entire face. Marco was transformed too. The weight of grief that had carved lines into his face began to ease. He laughed with his daughter, carried her on his shoulders through the rose garden, read her stories with voices and enthusiasm instead of quiet desperation. And through it all, Ella was there. Not as the maid anymore, but as part of the family. Isabella called her Ella Mama, sometimes, the word slipping out naturally before the child would blush and correct herself. But Ella never corrected her back. The title felt right, felt like coming home. She and Marco stole moments together when they could, late-night conversations in his study, early morning coffee before the household woke, stolen kisses in the garden pavilion. They talked about everything, their pasts, their hopes, the future they were building together. I'm leaving the life, Marco told her one night, his arms wrapped around her as they stood on his private balcony overlooking the estate. The criminal organizations, the illegal operations, I'm systematically dismantling all of it. Ella turned in his arms, studying his face. That's dangerous. Your enemies won't just let you walk away. I know. But I have to try. For Isabella. For you. For the future I want us to have. His hand came up to cup her face. I want to build something legitimate. Something my daughter won't be ashamed of. Something where you don't have to worry that loving me will destroy you. I'm not worried about that. Ella pressed her hand over his heart. I'm worried about you. About the targets this puts on your back. Let them come. Marco's voice was hard, determined. I've been in this life long enough to know how to protect what's mine. And you, Gabriella, you and Isabella, you're mine to protect. Always. The possessive declaration should have bothered her. Instead, it made her feel safer than she had in years. But safety, Ella was learning, was often an illusion. The threat came on a Tuesday afternoon. Isabella was in her room for her daily rest time, and Ella had gone to the kitchen to prepare the child's favorite snack. She was humming an old Italian song, slicing strawberries, when she felt it, the prickle of awareness that meant she was being watched. She turned to find a man she didn't recognize standing in the kitchen doorway. He was tall, pale, with cold blue eyes that assessed her like she was a commodity to be appraised. "Gabriella Romano," he said in heavily accented English. "Or should I say, Ella? Though I prefer your real name. It has more weight to it." Ella's hand tightened on the knife she'd been using. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" "Security is good but not perfect." The man smiled, but it was all teeth and no warmth. "I am Viktor Volkov. Perhaps Marco has mentioned me." Her blood ran cold. The Russian mob boss. The one Antonio had warned about. The one who'd been looking for leverage against Marco. "Mr. Volkov, you need to leave. This property is heavily guarded. Your guards are dealing with a small fire in the East Wing. Nothing serious, but enough to occupy them for the next 5 minutes." Victor moved further into the kitchen, and Ella saw 2 more men appear behind him. "Which gives us time to talk." "We have nothing to talk about." Ella backed toward the counter, her mind racing through options. She was alone. The household staff was dealing with the fire. Marco was in a meeting in the city. Isabella was upstairs, vulnerable. "Oh, but we do." Victor leaned against the counter, casual, like they were discussing the weather. "You see, I've been watching Marco Santoro for some time. Waiting for weakness. Waiting for leverage. And then you appeared. The mysterious maid who suddenly became so much more. I'm nobody important." "Liar." Victor's smile sharpened. "You're Gabriella Romano, daughter of the infamous Vincent Romano. You have a psychology degree from Columbia. You speak 3 languages fluently. You're intelligent, educated, and you've done something remarkable. You've made Marco Santoro fall in love with you." Ella's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "What do you want?" "Simple. Marco has been interfering with my expansion into his territories. He's been turning my partners against me. He's cost me money and respect." Victor's eyes went cold. "I want him to stop. I want him to concede Brooklyn, Queens, and his shipping operations. And you're going to convince him to do it." "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'll hurt the child upstairs." Victor said it casually, like he was discussing menu options. Little Isabella, who just learned to speak again. Who just started seeing the world. It would be tragic if something happened to her. Another accident. Another trauma. But this time, one she wouldn't recover from. Rage flooded through Ella, hot and fierce. "You touch that child, and Marco will destroy you. He'll tear apart your entire organization piece by piece. Perhaps. But Isabella will still be broken. And you'll know you could have prevented it." Victor pulled out his phone, showing her a photo, Isabella's bedroom, taken from inside the house. "My men have access to every room in this estate. We've been watching for weeks. We know her schedule, her routines, her vulnerabilities. One word from me, and..." The kitchen door burst open. Marco stood there, flanked by Antonio and 4 armed guards, his expression carved from ice and fury. "Step away from her," Marco said, his voice deadly quiet. "Now." Victor smiled, unconcerned. "Aw, Marco. I was just having a conversation with your beautiful Gabriella. We were discussing terms." "There are no terms." Marco moved into the kitchen, his body positioning itself between Ella and Victor. "You broke into my home. You threatened my family. The only discussion we're having now is how quickly I kill you. Kill me, and my organization retaliates. You know how this works, Marco. I didn't come here alone. I have men positioned throughout the city, ready to act on my signal." Victor held up his phone. "One message from me, and they move. Your legitimate businesses burn. Your remaining partners disappear. And little Isabella, well, accidents happen to children all the time." Ella saw Marco's hands clench into fists, saw the murderous rage warring with fear for his daughter. She knew what Victor was doing, backing Marco into a corner where violence would cost more than capitulation. But Ella also knew something Victor didn't. "You're bluffing," she said clearly. Every eye turned to her. Marco's expression flickered with surprise. Victor's smile hardened. "Excuse me," Victor said. You're bluffing about having access to Isabella's room. Ella moved to stand beside Marco, her hand finding his. That photo you showed me, it was taken 3 weeks ago. I can tell because of the flowers on her nightstand. White roses that Mrs. Chen replaces every Monday. They've been red roses for the past 2 weeks. Victor's smile faltered slightly. And your men don't have access to this estate anymore, Ella continued, her psychology training kicking in. Because Antonio upgraded all the security systems 5 days ago. Retinal scanners, new codes, background checks on every staff member. Your insider information is outdated. You're running on old intelligence and hoping we don't notice. Marco's hand tightened on hers, understanding flooding his expression. She's right. You don't have the access you're claiming. You broke in during the fire distraction because it was your only way inside. And now you're trapped here, in my home, surrounded by my men. Victor's casual demeanor cracked. I still have my organization. I still have. You have nothing. Antonio spoke up, pulling out his own phone. While you were in here making threats, we've been dismantling your operation. Federal raids are hitting your warehouses in Brooklyn right now. Your bank's accounts are being frozen. Your partners have been offered immunity to testify against you. He showed Victor the screen, live news footage of FBI agents swarming a warehouse. You came here thinking you had leverage. But you walked into a trap. The color drained from Victor's face. You planned this. You wanted me to come here. We knew you were watching, Marco said, his voice cold. We knew you'd make a move eventually. So we gave you bait, Gabriella, seemingly vulnerable in the kitchen. Antonio's men dealt with your fire distraction in 90 seconds, then surrounded this building. You've been in my custody since the moment you walked through that door. You can't, Victor started. I can. Marco moved closer, his presence overwhelming. You threatened my daughter. You threatened the woman I love. You broke the one rule everyone knows, you don't touch family. Not mine. Not ever. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Victor's eyes widened with realization. You called the police. You never call the police. I'm not that man anymore. Marco's voice was steel. I'm leaving the criminal world, Volkov. I'm building something legitimate. Something clean. And that means when someone breaks into my home and threatens my family, I don't handle it in the shadows anymore. I let the law do its job. FBI agents flooded into the kitchen, weapons drawn. Victor and his men were surrounded, handcuffed, their threats and bluster evaporating in the face of federal charges. As they were led away, Victor shouted, "This isn't over, Santoro. My organization will." Your organization is finished, Antonio called after him. Every lieutenant, every operation, every dirty secret, we gave it all to the FBI. You're done. When the kitchen finally cleared, when the agents and Victor and the chaos all faded away, Ella found herself alone with Marco. His arms wrapped around her immediately, pulling her tight against his chest. When I got Antonio's call that Volkov was in the house, that you were alone with him, Marco's voice shook. Dio mio, Gabriella. I've never been so terrified. I'm okay. We're okay. Ella pulled back to look at him. You really gave everything to the FBI? All your evidence on Volkov? Yes. And not just on him. On everyone. Every criminal connection, every illegal operation I've been part of. Marco's eyes held hers. I made a deal. Full immunity in exchange for testimony and evidence. I'm out, Gabriella. Completely out. The FBI is using what I gave them to dismantle 3 major crime families. It's over. Marco, Ella's voice caught. Do you know what you've just done? The enemies you've made. The targets. I know. Which is why the FBI is also providing protection. Witness security for me, for Isabella, for you. He cupped her face in his hands. We're leaving New York. New identities, new location, new life. The 3 of us, starting over somewhere safe. Ella's mind spun. You'd give up everything. Your home, your business, your identity. I'd give up the world for you and Isabella. Marco's voice was absolute. Don't you understand? You're my world now. You and my daughter. Everything else is just stuff. Buildings and money and a name that's caused more pain than it's worth. Tears streamed down Ella's face. I love you. God help me, I love you so much. Then say yes. Marco pulled a ring from his pocket, a stunning vintage piece with a large sapphire surrounded by diamonds. Marry me, Gabriella. Not someday, not eventually. Now. Today. Let's go to the courthouse and become a family legally before we disappear into our new life. Let me make you mine in every way that matters. Yes. The word came without hesitation. Yes, absolutely yes. Marco kissed her, deep and desperate and full of promise. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. I need to tell Isabella. I need to prepare her for the move, for the changes. Papa. A small voice interrupted them. They turned to find Isabella standing in the kitchen doorway, her eyes wide but clear, focused. I heard the police sirens. I heard the shouting. Are we safe? Marco immediately crossed to her, scooping her into his arms. We're safe, Principessa. We're all safe. But I need to talk to you about something important. Over the next hour, in Isabella's playroom with Ella beside him, Marco explained everything to his daughter in age-appropriate terms. That they were leaving New York. That they'd have new names, a new home, a new life somewhere safer. That Ella would be coming with them. That they'd be a family. Isabella listened carefully, her small face serious. When Marco finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, will I still be Isabella? In our home, always, Marco assured her. We might have different names for documents, for school, for the outside world. But between us, you'll always be my Isabella. My Principessa. And Ella will be my mama. Isabella looked at Ella with hopeful eyes. For real. Not just visiting. Ella knelt beside the child, taking her small hands. For real, Bambina. If you want me to be. Your papa and I are getting married today. We're becoming a family officially. I want that. Isabella threw her arms around Ella's neck. I want you to be my mama. I want us to be together always. Always, Ella promised, holding the child close. Through everything. No matter what. They were married that afternoon in a small courthouse ceremony with Antonio and Mrs. Chin as witnesses. Ella wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Chin had somehow procured in under an hour. Marco wore a dark suit. Isabella stood between them, holding both their hands, her face glowing with happiness. When the judge pronounced them married, when Marco kissed his bride and Isabella cheered, Ella felt something shift in her chest. The broken pieces of her life, the scandal, the loss, the years of hiding, suddenly made sense. They had led her here. To this man, this child, this family. Mrs. Santoro, Marco murmured against her lips. Though that name won't last long. I don't care what name I have, Ella whispered back. As long as I have you. That night, their last night in the mansion, Marco held Ella on his private balcony while Isabella slept soundly in her room, finally peaceful after years of silence and fear. Where do we go? Ella asked softly. Where does the FBI send us? Montana, Marco said. Small town, beautiful mountains, quiet life. I'll be a business consultant. You'll finish your psychology degree online, eventually open a practice helping children. Isabella will go to normal school, have normal friends, be a normal kid. Normal. Ella tested the word. I don't think we're capable of normal. Marco laughed, the sound genuine and warm. Probably not. But we can try. We can build something good, something safe, something that honors all we've survived. And your mother. Your family in Italy. They'll visit carefully, discreetly, once we're settled. The FBI is working out the details. Marco's arms tightened around her. But my real family is right here. You and Isabella. Everything I need. Ella turned in his arms, looking up at his face in the moonlight. This complicated, dangerous, wonderful man who'd seen her when she was invisible, who'd trusted her with his greatest treasure, who'd given up his entire world to keep them safe. I was so lost before you, she whispered. Hiding, surviving, but not really living. You gave me back my purpose. My life. Myself. You saved me first, Marco countered. You and Isabella both. You showed me that redemption is possible. That love is stronger than legacy. That I could be more than my father's son. They kissed as the sun set over the estate, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow they would leave this place forever. Tomorrow they would become new people with new names in a new life. But tonight, they were Marco and Gabriella, celebrating their wedding night, their new family, their hard-won happiness. 6 months later. The small house in Montana was nothing like the Santoro mansion. It was modest, cozy, surrounded by pine trees and mountains instead of security walls and guards. But to Ella, now Emily Carson, according to her new identity, it was perfect. She stood at the kitchen window, watching Marco, now Michael Carson, push Isabella on the tire swing he'd hung from the old oak tree. Their daughter's laughter rang out, pure and joyful, the sound of a child who felt safe enough to be loud. Isabella had adjusted remarkably well to their new life. She attended the local elementary school, made friends easily, and was thriving in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. She still had nightmares sometimes, still needed extra reassurance. But she was healing, growing, becoming the bright, happy child she was meant to be. Mama. Isabella called out now, she'd fully embraced calling Ella by that title. Come push me. Papa pushes too high. I do not. Marco protested, grinning. You just want to go higher and I'm trying to keep you safe. Ella laughed, heading outside to join her family. As she approached, Marco caught her around the waist, pulling her close for a quick kiss while Isabella made exaggerated gagging sounds. Happy, he murmured against her lips. Deliriously. Ella smiled up at him. You. More than I knew was possible. Marco's eyes held hers, warm and content. Though I got notification today that the last of the trials concluded. Volkov got 25 years. The Moretti family leadership is dismantled. It's truly over. Are we safe? Ella asked quietly. As safe as we can be. The FBI says there's no credible threats. Most of the people who might have wanted revenge are in prison. And even if someone came looking, Michael and Emily Carson are just a normal family in Montana. We're ghosts to that old world. Normal. There was that word again. They still weren't entirely normal. Marco consulted remotely for legitimate businesses, making more money than most people in their small town could imagine. Ella had enrolled in an online program to complete her psychology degree and had started volunteering at the local children's hospital. But they were building something real. Something good. Something that honored all they'd survived. Mama, Papa. Isabella jumped off the swing and ran to them. Mrs. Peterson says I can be in the school play. Can I? Please. Of course, Tesoro, Ella said, kneeling to hug her daughter. What's the play? The Wizard of Oz. I might get to be Dorothy. Isabella's eyes shone with excitement. She gets to go on an adventure and find her way home, Anne. She stopped abruptly, her expression growing serious. Mama, do you think my first mama would be happy? That I'm happy now? That I'm not sad all the time anymore? Ella's throat tightened. They'd been working with a child therapist, someone cleared by the FBI who understood their unique situation, helping Isabella process her grief over Maria's death. I think, Ella said carefully, that your first mama loved you more than anything. And that she would want exactly what we want, for you to be happy, healthy, and safe. For you to laugh and play and live a beautiful life. Loving her and being happy now aren't opposites, Bambina. They go together. Like how Papa still loves first mama but also loves you. Isabella asked with the blunt insight of children. Marco knelt beside them, his hand on Isabella's shoulder. Exactly like that. Love doesn't run out or get used up. It grows. It makes room for more. Your first mama will always be your first mama. But Ella is your mama now too. And all of that love, for both of them, for all of us, it makes us stronger, not weaker. Isabella thought about this, her small face serious. Then she threw her arms around both of them. I love you. Both of you. So much. We love you too, Principessa, Marco murmured. More than all the stars in the sky. As they stood, this family built from tragedy and choice and fierce love, Ella felt the last pieces of her broken past finally settle into place. She'd lost everything once. Her name, her family, her future. She'd hidden and survived and learned to be invisible. But in losing everything, she'd gained what mattered most. A daughter who trusted her. A husband who loved her. A purpose that went beyond survival into actual living. The nurse who'd discovered a child's secret. The mob boss who'd chosen redemption over power. The little girl who'd found her voice again. Three broken people who'd found each other and built something whole. That night, after Isabella was asleep, Ella stood on their small back porch, looking up at the Montana stars. Marco came out to join her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders and pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. How far we've come. How different life looks now." Ella leaned into his warmth. "A year ago, I was a maid hiding from my past. You were a mob boss drowning in grief. Isabella was locked in silence and false blindness. And now? Now we're a family. A real, actual family." Ella turned in his arms. "I know it's not perfect. I know we still have challenges and healing to do. But Marco, Michael, whoever you are, whatever name you use, I've never been happier. Neither have I." Marco kissed her forehead. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "We get to wake up tomorrow and do it all again. Build our life. Love our daughter. Be together." His smile was soft, genuine. "Every day for the rest of our lives." "Every day," Ella agreed. "I like the sound of that." They stood together under the stars, this couple who'd found love in the darkest places, who'd chosen each other despite impossible odds, who'd built a family from broken pieces. Inside, Isabella dreamed peaceful dreams, safe and loved. Tomorrow she'd practice for her school play. Marco would work on his consulting projects. Ella would study for her psychology finals. They'd be a normal family doing normal things. But they'd also carry the extraordinary truth with them always, that love could bloom anywhere, that redemption was possible, that sometimes the riskiest choices led to the most beautiful destinations. The maid who'd whispered secrets in perfect Italian. The Mafia boss who'd frozen at the truth. The daughter who'd learned to see again. Their story had begun with hidden truths and dangerous revelations. It had survived threats and violence and impossible odds. And it would continue, day by day, moment by moment, in a small town in Montana where nobody knew their real names or their complicated past. Where they could simply be a family. And that, Ella thought as Marco held her close, was the greatest gift of all. 1 year later. The community theater was packed for Isabella's school play. Ella sat in the front row, Marco's hand clasped tightly in hers, both of them bursting with pride as their daughter took the stage as Dorothy. Isabella had come so far. Not just learning to speak again, but truly thriving. She had friends, hobbies, confidence. She still saw her therapist monthly, still had hard days when she missed her first mother. But she was healing in the way children do, not forgetting, but growing around the grief, making space for joy alongside the sorrow. "She's incredible," Marco whispered as Isabella delivered her lines with perfect clarity and emotion. "She gets it from you," Ella whispered back. "The determination. The courage. She gets it from both of us. And from Maria. All the people who love her, past and present." When the play ended, when Isabella took her bows to thunderous applause, she scanned the audience until her eyes found them. Her face lit up with the most beautiful smile, and she waved enthusiastically, unconcerned with breaking character. That was their daughter. Joyful, free, unafraid to show love. After the performance, as they walked to their car with Isabella chattering excitedly between them, Ella reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd entered the Santoro mansion as a maid, hiding from her past, invisible and alone. She'd discovered a secret that changed everything. She'd fallen in love with a dangerous man who was trying to be good. She'd helped a broken child find her way back to the light. And in doing all of that, she'd found herself. Her purpose. Her family. Her home. "Mama, Papa," Isabella said suddenly. "Thank you." "For what, tesoro?" Marco asked. "For being my family. For helping me be brave. For loving me." Isabella looked up at them with clear, focused, joyful eyes. "For everything." Ella's throat tightened with emotion. "Thank you for letting us love you, Bambina. For trusting us. For being brave enough to come back to us." As they drove home through the Montana night, Isabella fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from her big performance. Marco glanced in the rearview mirror, his expression soft with love. "We did good," he said quietly. "Despite everything, the danger, the complications, the impossible odds, we did good." "We did," Ella agreed. "We built something beautiful." And they had. A family forged in truth and tested by fire. A love that had survived secrets and danger and transformation. A child who'd found her voice and her sight and her joy again. The maid, the mafia boss, and the daughter who could see. Their story, finally complete. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved Isabella, Marco, and Ella's story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.